The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to Afterlife Radio. I'm Kalila Smith coming to you live from New Orleans, the land of voodoo and the land of spirits. And I'm going to be exploring today, talking about something kind of weird, residual energy. A lot of people with the paranormal groups and doing paranormal investigations, there's a lot of people that don't really understand the different types of hauntings out there. And a lot of it is just residual energy. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. And at the top of the hour, we're going to do our weekly advice to budding mediums. And that's always very fun and helpful. But first, let's say hello to my co-host, coming to you live from the UK in Cornwall, the inventor of television psychics, the great Billy Roberts. Billy, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to be back, Kalila.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. So I was looking at some things, and I watch these paranormal groups, and I watch their questions, and I watch their posts, and I interact with them, and I see that a lot of people are very, very confused about residual energy. And we talked before about the aura and about how even objects, anything solid has an aura to it. So people are going into these properties, and I think sometimes, and I think quite frankly, and I do believe that a lot of parapsychologists would agree with this, is that the vast majority of what we call hauntings are residual hauntings. And a lot of people don't know where to differentiate whether something's a residual energy that's basically that building's aura, or that it's an intelligent spirit. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the problem I've got with all this is a lot of this terminology was created by television. I mean, in my day, when I first started working as a medium, the term residual energy was alien. I mean, I wouldn't have known what it was. But when you look at it from today's perception, you know that residual energy is just very much related to the stone tape theory, that energy is encapsulated, it's impregnated into the very fabric of a building. And I think we've discussed before that a lot of what we see in apparitions and feelings, manifestations of what we think is spirit, is what people would say residual energy. This is an overlay of energy that's in the building itself. When you get an old house, an old building that had a lot of people living it over the hundreds of years, these people impregnate the atmosphere with their emotions, their sadnesses, their joys, their happinesses. It's all in the fabric of the building. So people through the years who come to live there can actually feel it, feel that energy of all the people who've been there in the past. And, a man might say to his wife, well, I've found the house we're looking for. It's beautiful. It's right by the river. Come and see it. I'll get the keys and we'll go and have a look. And as soon as she steps in, his wife might say, well, if you want to live here, you'll live here by yourself. And he will say, well, the atmosphere is great. It's lovely. And she'll say, I'm glad you think so. So you come and live here and I'll stay where I am. Now, what is it about a woman that can home in to an atmosphere where a man can't? Women, as we said, are more sensitive than men in more ways than one. So we do know that there's a sort of an energy in the atmosphere, whether it's in a district, a town or city. Cities, towns, and your place where you are now with all the aggression is permeated by the thoughts of the people involved in the perpetration of this anger. So that could be regarded as residual energy, and you're not going to eradicate it. It's going to be there from time immemorial, influencing the minds of people who frequent the area. It's the same with old buildings. And you can destroy a building, but you cannot destroy energy. Energy will transmute. It will metamorphose into something else. So that could be regarded as residual energy. So it's nothing, I don't think, to do with an actual spirit as much as it is to do with people who have created it in the past. It's just my perception of it.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. And I know that when I was beginning to study about hauntings and the paranormal and so forth, it was in the late 70s. And they used to call the residual haunting a shade. I don't know. Have you ever heard that term where they called it a shade?
No, I haven't.
Okay, yeah, they used to call it a shade. And basically it's just what you said. It's the energy. And sometimes it's not necessarily the energy of anyone who died there, but certainly when there is a trauma, when there's some sort of a traumatic death, an untimely death, someone who died some horrific way, it does leave an impression, just like the other energy does, that tends to be a little more prominent. So if you are sensitive to that type of energy and you walk into a place, you're going to feel it. And if you're clairvoyant, you might even see it play out like a real movie, like a movie that just kind of does this little loop where it plays over and over again. Or perhaps you hear a sound that plays over and over again, and it's not something that's occurring there. You're just hearing that energetic impression. And it's almost like a loop, like a sound loop, and you'll hear it over and over and over again. Or even a smell you might hear. I know there was a place in Miami where, the lady that lived there who died very tragically, she always made that very strong Cuban coffee in the morning. And people go in and they will smell the smell of her coffee, or they'll smell the smell of her perfume. And that's very common in a residual haunting as well. And honestly, I have found that some residual hauntings are actually, to me, more frightening and more powerful than an actual entity. A few years ago, I had an instance where we were doing an investigation on a building that had a horrific fire. And it was one of the worst hate crimes in the city's history. I think it was in the 80s. And there was a church group that was holding their church Sunday's church meetings in a bar, which sounds a little weird, but in the French Quarter it happens. And so there was this bar called the Upstairs Lounge, and it was a gay bar. And there was a minister who would hold his church service there as they were waiting to be able to afford to build the building. And someone went there and threw a Molotov cocktail into the stairwell and locked the stairwell from the outside. This is back in the day where they had those clasp locks where you would throw the clasp and then you could put a padlock on it. And someone, locked them into this building and then called upstairs to the building and said, someone called for a cab. I'm downstairs. And they looked around and said, hey, anybody call for a cab? And nobody really knew what was going on. And one person said, well, let me go look. And when he opened that door, the backdraft pulled the fire into the building. It was absolutely horrific. Amazingly, some people did survive it, but it was really horrible. There were bars on the windows. Of some of the windows, people couldn't get out. It was absolutely horrific situation. And it left a very big impression there. And it was one Halloween many, many years ago, and I was exhausted. I had a little group come to New Orleans, and they begged me to come on an investigation there. And I said, well, okay, I'm not going to do anything, though. I'm going to stay in the background, and I'm just going to take pictures. I'm just going to film. I'm going to bring a video camera, and I'll just film you guys doing the investigation, but I'm not going to open up to anything. And that was one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made, and this was about 25 years ago. And it was kind of foolish because I didn't realize how powerful it was going to be when we walked in there. And I got what I call a psychic blindside, where it just kind of came out of nowhere and it hit me. And I not only started getting visions in the place, I started smelling the smoke. And I was left with a respiratory situation going on, a respiratory infection that lasted about 3 weeks from literally being in this situation where I was breathing in this smoke from this residual energy. And I had never had experienced that before. Have you ever had that happen where you walk into a place and it just, you don't expect anything to happen and it just psychically hits you?
Yeah, and you, to be honest, you have to be aware of these things. I said earlier on about preparing yourself for all eventualities. I was with, although not quite the same, we had a builder in one of our houses some years ago, and we didn't know it then, but he used to imbibe some narcotics, and he died in front of me. He collapsed in front of me and passed away. And at the moment he took his last breath, he sort of discharged this perfume. The only way I can describe it is like talcum powder. And it just wafted across the room. And when the medics got there, it had gone. They took him from the house. There wasn't a smell. There was nothing to do with that particular fragrance. And a few people have told me when they've been with somebody who's collapsed and died suddenly, there's this discharge of perfume, like talcum powder. And that's always, I've always been concerned about it. Always wonder what it's a strange phenomenon, but I think it's to do with the spirit leaving the body. I could be wrong.
Oh, well, I'll have to put that one out there and see if because I know a lot of people who are like nurses and so forth who have been in situations where they're there when people die. And that's the first time I've heard of that. That's fascinating. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. So anyway, before we move on, we're going to talk to Billy in a little bit about pranayama. He's mentioned that a few times, and we're going to kind of get a little bit detail there for people to understand that a little bit better. But right now, we're going to take a little commercial break, and we will be right back.
Submit for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter with actually documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN, and it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about, the Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween Spellhouse.
And we are back. Now, Billy is going to talk to us about pranayama and talking about the prana and how all this connects to everything. So I'm going to turn it over to Billy and let him explain.
But the one thing about pranayama, I mean, you have to be in the hands of an experienced teacher. But there are different levels of pranayamic exercises. But breathing is vitally important. It's a process that helps the chakras to become active and also purifies in some way the aura. Now, pranayama can take many different forms. I've mentioned before about rhythmic breathing, but our heart rate is different in each person. But if you ascertain your normal heartbeat and place your fingers on your pulse and just count mentally with each heartbeat up to 6. Now, we base the rhythmic time upon a unit corresponding with the beat of the heart. So if you inhale very slowly, counting 6 pulse units, hold your breath, counting 3, exhale for 6, count 3 between breath, so on and so forth. And you do that for about 5, maybe 10 minutes. If you find that the count of 6 is beyond your capacity, your lung capacity, then take it down, but always hold your breath. The retentions in between breaths should be 1/2 the number of the inhalations and exhalations. Now that will quieten the mind and make you focused, help you to be focused on the meditation that you're going to do. Now prana, I just said before, the prana is a subtle agent through which the life of the body is sustained. So the more prana that can enter the body, the higher the quality of your life. Prana is in the air that we breathe, but it's not the air itself. It's in the food we eat, but it's not the food itself. It's very prevalent in water. And even a bottle of water will have pranic energy, but it will be dormant. So before you drink prana, pour the water into one glass, one vessel, and pour it from one glass to the other through the air, over and over, until the water actually sparkles and comes alive, and then drink it. And you'll find that the water tastes different. It has a different taste to it. Water can also be revitalized by color. We can use different colored glasses. If you've got an energy problem, if you have a blood problem, if you use a red glass filled with water, you can leave it on the window ledge in the bright sunlight for an hour or two, and then drink it in 2 doses. It can be refrigerated, and that will energize your body. So every color has a particular effect on your body. So you can use different colors, called chromotherapy. Franz Anton Mesmer, who was the innovator of mesmerism, what we know today, we know as hypnotism. He was very aware of this energy that exuded from the bodies of some of his students. Now, although he taught them all the same techniques, he noticed only 1 or 2 of them had this energy that came from their fingertips and from their eyes and from their solar plexus. He referred to it as magnetic energy, but a yogic friend of his told him this was pranic energy. Some people have prana in great amounts in their body, and just by being in their presence uplifts us, revitalizes us, but also depletes them. We become vampires and take from them the energy we need. But a healthy person soon restores their pranic energy levels. But a person who is unwell or works a lot with their mind, people in the psychic field, they often deplete very, very quickly. So it's vitally important that you learn about the process of respiration in relation to prana intake. So breathing rhythmically is important, and focus. So prana manifests in different ways. You'll find that some people retain prana in great amounts, and they will give it to you freely. But prana also is the agent that can be discharged for the purpose of healing. People who work on the land, farmers, people who are always in the garden, these people seem to have great amounts of prana. People who work in the psychic field don't have a lot of prana. Their demeanor seems to be different from a healthy person. And your posture is important, because people who lack pranic energy and who work in the psychic field often have bad posture. They breathe from their shoulders instead of doing diaphragmatic breathing, which is important. So that's all I've got to say on that particular subject.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So the prana is pretty much everything. And prana is basically, for a lot of you who are taking martial arts or something, like I did, it's chi. You know, it goes by many, many names. You know, so people call
exactly.
it, in Chinese, they call it chi. And in Japanese, when I took shiatsu, they called it ki. In Hindu, it's prana. And it's basically life force. It's what it is. And it's that life force energy that's coming from the universe. And, you know, you mentioned, interestingly enough, that we become vampires. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, here in New Orleans, we do have people who do call themselves vampires. And they live that lifestyle. And some of them are what we call psychic vampires, and they take energy from other people. And I always found that very interesting because, and not everybody does it on purpose. Some people don't even realize they do it.
Exactly.
People, people who are mentally ill or sick people, they will instinctively start pulling prana or life force from other people. Don't you find that to be true, Billy?
Yeah, I do. And you're right in saying people do it. A lot of people do it unintentionally, but some do it intentionally. Now, I should have mentioned earlier on about the chakras. There are three major channels which are considered primary in the physical body. And these are Ida and Pingala. And the central spinal channel is called Sushumna. Now, the Ida and Pingala intertwine Sushumna in a serpentine pattern, conveying the energy from the chakras all the way up through the organs of the physical body. So it's important that we breathe correctly, and meditation is paramount if you're developing your faculties. That's all. I forgot to mention it earlier on.
No, that's important. That's very important. And it's so much. I mean, it's certainly so much more information than you can possibly do in the course of one radio show, because most people, and I want to say that because a lot of people, again, a lot of people think they take a workshop or they read a book and then they know everything there is to know about it. But, the people who are masters at these things, they study this for a lifetime. This is a lifetime of study and practicing. I do yoga, and my teacher always says, your yoga practice, because you're constantly practicing, you're constantly doing it, and it becomes a lifetime thing. It's a way of life. It's not just something you do once a week. I find myself just sitting at my chair and doing the mudras, the hand positions, and sometimes I just sit here and I find myself that my hands are automatically in a certain mudra. And it's just something that you do, and it becomes part of who you are, and it really does energize you, and it changes you energetically. And as mediums, that's what you want to do. You want to raise your vibration, and you want to integrate that body, mind, and spirit all into this one integrated being without being all scattered. Because, in the course of a day, how many times are you doing something? You're doing something physical, and then you're thinking something else, and then your mind is also over here looking at what you're going to do, 2 days from now. And you've got all of this multi things going on, multitasking, as I call it. You have to stop. And really, in order to raise that vibration and have it affect you as a medium, you have to be able to integrate all that. And this pranayama, the yoga, the mudras, developing your chakras, all of this builds up to that. Don't you think so, Billy?
I do. I really do. And I think people have said to me, well, what's prana got to do with mediumistic development? What's the chakras got to do with it? It's got a lot to do with it. It's all to do with terminology. I made it my business because I did hatha yoga for many, many years. And then I went over to Raja Yoga, the yoga of the kings, the more philosophical yoga. And I found that a lot of the terminology is important because they're like disciplines. Mediums tend to be very undisciplined. I don't know what it's like in America, but a lot of mediums do smoke here and have poor diet. Now, I've not eaten meat since I was like 14, and I've never drunk milk in my life because I love animals, and I can't see the point of eating something that, you love. And I think we all have our own opinions of that. But I think a lot of yogi masters, they'll abstain from meat eating. And I think it raises in some way the vibrations of your soul, makes you more sensitive and more aware of things. But we need, as mediums, to realize that it's an ever-ending process. Development goes on till the day you die, because even a medium who claims to be naturally born as a medium, as I was, you still have to refine it and develop it. And you still have to sit in what we call a development circle under the supervision of a trained medium. You have to learn how to turn it on and turn it off. I think we've discussed before about the way mediums are tuning in all the time. That's an unhealthy practice. We need to control it, like turning the radio on to listen to a favorite program, or turning it off.
I agree on that. That's very, very important.
Stay tuned for more Afterlife Radio.
Step beyond the veil that separates our world from the world of spirits with me, Kalila Smith, as we uncover the mysteries of the afterlife. This is a spiritual journey as we try to discover if life really does continue after the physical death. Are after-death communications real, or do we imagine them? Get my book, Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, and find out. Afterlife Mysteries Revealed, available on Amazon.com by Kalila Smith.
You're listening to Afterlife Radio.
You still there?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Because we kind of stopped. Yeah, no, I agree totally on that. That is just so important. And I think it needs to be said again and again and again as people develop, because people always, and I see it over and over again, not just in mediums or psychics, but in all walks of life. Somebody takes a workshop, they go somewhere, they take a workshop, and when they come back, they're teaching it. And it's not that way. It's just really not that way in the real world, because this is something, it's a discipline. Just like martial arts is a discipline. You're learning to sit in the power with spirit is a discipline, and learning to let go and be able to just let spirit put you in the direction that you need to be put in. And a lot of people also lose sight of that. They want to do the look at me thing. Look at me, look what I can do. And they don't realize that it's a total surrendering to spirit. And you basically become a servant to spirit, and you need to be able to let go of that ego and let go of those expectations and just learn to be.
And also, being too blinkered will hinder your progression, your development, because it's important to read as much as you can and have an eclectic knowledge of all different subjects. And that's something that you need to do. I mean, I might have mentioned before, but one of the first books I read was The 14 Lessons in Yogi Philosophy and Oriental Occultism by Yogi Ramacharaka. And that book could have been written yesterday, because it's got all the modern day terminology, even though it was written at the latter part of the 20th century. So reading is important to feed the mind. And I laugh sometimes. And I've had developing mediums come to my workshops, and they say they never read because spirit gives them all the knowledge. And it often shows in the way they talk and the knowledge they have, which is very limited. So we've not to be too blinkered and just focused totally on spiritualism or spiritism. We have to broaden the horizons. And this is the only way mediumship will be modernized, because we need younger mediums, and we need to modernize the whole thing to make it more interesting to the layman. Because I said another time that people are becoming more discerning now because of the programs, the television programs, all the paranormal and ghost hunting programs, lots of them, hundreds of them. So whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I don't know. But I think people often have the wrong idea as to the function of a medium. And it only has one function, and that is to prove the continuity of the soul beyond death. Not more than that. I mean, telling the person who consults you that they've had a hard life, or they've been divorced, or they've got difficulties, financial, emotional problems, that's not mediumship. It could be construed as being psychic, but mediumship is something completely different. It's when you involve yourself in some kind of spiritual activity and say, look, I've got John Brown here, or I've got Phoebe here, and she tells me she lived in number 40, whatever road she lived in. Being as specific as you possibly can. Now, sometimes people say, well, I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. But they do have a sequence of extraneous thoughts that come into their head. Thoughts that you know are not your own thoughts. And that could be defined as clairaudience, because clairaudience is not just hearing a voice. It can be a thought process, thoughts coming into your mind from a disembodied soul. If, for an example, Kalila, you're washing the dishes or doing something mundane, And out of the blue, when you're even not thinking about it, Stephanie's name comes into your head. That's because she's there.
Right.
And that's the way they communicate. But I'm not saying you don't know she's there, because obviously you would do. But it could be your aunt or your mum or whoever. They come into your head for no apparent reason. And we need to take the time and stop and speak to them mentally, because that's how they communicate more often than not. I think the whole subject is so fascinating. I can't take me anywhere because I bore people talking about it.
I don't see how you could ever bore people, because I do think it's that interesting. And it's good that we still, after this many years, find it so fascinating and are so enthralled with it, because you should never be bored with this. This is limitless. And that's the thing, is that, a lot of people put limitations on their mediumship, and they want this, they have an expectation, and they have a goal, and they're very goal oriented. And I want to do this, I want to be able to do this. And if you just let go of the any types of limits that you put onto it, let go of any ego, let go of any expectations, and just allow spirit to do what it needs to do, that's the way to become a good medium, because spirit is limitless. And if you put expectations on there, your spirits are going to be saying, well, that's as far as they want to go, so we don't want to take them any farther because we don't want to make them uncomfortable, so we're going to just leave them right there. And that's basically what happens. You have to allow spirit and trust spirit that it is limitless, and allow the process to happen organically.
Exactly. And also, I said about thoughts coming into your head. Sometimes if you're doing a demonstration in a theater or a church, and you have all these thoughts coming into your head, you have to voice them. You have to say to whoever you're speaking to, I've got whatever the name is. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. But you can always find who the name belongs to. There are different techniques you can develop by working your way around, because you always get people in an audience or a congregation who are very, they want to present problems and make it difficult for you. And it's only experience, really, that helps you to overcome these obstacles, because there are obstacles. And mediumship is a very painful process. It can take away all your confidence. It can make you very depressed if it doesn't work all the time. A medium is only as good as the audience they work with. And sometimes that audience is not good. They can be very difficult and very cruel.
Yes.
Yes,
they can. They can indeed. I do find that for the most part here, and when I say here, I don't mean everywhere in the United States, because obviously I haven't been everywhere, but I'm talking about here in New Orleans. For the most part, people who come to gallery readings, people who come to what I guess you would call platforms, they're usually very receptive to it, and they're going with the hopes that they will get something. And again, even if you're not a medium and you're just a sitter, you go to mediums. You're wanting to make contact with your loved one because you're having a hard time getting messages from them. You're not seeing the signs. You're not getting anything. They're not showing up in dreams, and you seek out a medium because you need a third party to kind of, intercede into this situation. And even if you're just a sitter, you want to let go of expectations, because if you go saying, okay, I want to talk to Grandpa, and I only want to talk to Grandpa, well, you might not get Grandpa. People don't understand that when mediums, and I don't care how good you are, I don't care how long you've been doing it, how good you are, and how good of a track record you have, the medium does not choose who comes through.
Exactly.
And sometimes you go and you go to see a medium, and the person you don't ever want to talk to in life, that person you couldn't stand in life, they come through. And that's a very weird thing that happens. So we're going to go to commercial. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about that, because that's a very interesting subject. And a lot of people don't understand why that's important to even accept those messages from somebody you hated. So we'll be right back.
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine for a moment a tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN, and it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about, the Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween Schoolhouse. This is real.
And we are back. So why would someone come through that in life you didn't particularly care for, or vice versa? You know, people always talk about unfinished business. You know, we always go to a medium because we're trying to heal our grief. We're trying to heal from a situation. We're trying to find out if our loved one is okay. And we forget that they're not just little puppets sitting on the other side and they're doing a little show for you. I mean, people forget that. People have to realize that when you do pass over, that lots of times you do have unfinished business, and lots of times you're still developing as a spirit. And I've seen on several occasions where people have come through, and I realized during the process, especially if I'm just watching another medium work, and in our circle, we have a medium who does direct voice, and I watch what's going on when she's working with people, and sometimes I realize that message that just happened, that experience that just happened was not for the sitter, it was for the spirit. And it's a give and take thing. It's always a give and take thing between us and those on the other side. And it's kind of a working thing. It's your energy, the medium's energy, and those people on the other side. And when that spirit comes through that you don't like, the worst thing I think you can do is say, I don't want to hear their message, because you know, maybe you don't necessarily need to hear that message, but maybe they need to give you that message. Maybe they need that to complete their journey that they're on. Don't you agree, Billy?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other point I would like to make, just going back a few sentences, because a medium is on television, doesn't mean to say that he's genuine. And a lot of these television programs could be, I'm not saying they are, but they could be scripted, because don't forget, it is television. And I've seen it quite a lot, particularly with American mediums, I'll mention no names for legal reasons, but there is one American medium who, when he's doing readings or when he's on TV, he will say to you, who are you hoping to hear from? And the person might say, my son, and he will say, yes, he's here. And then he'll work on that premise. Because as you've just said, you can't call them back. They come back of their own accord. And if it's possible, sometimes, you know, it might be a neighbor from across the street whose husband died 20 years ago, might come back through a reading. You think, well, why? Because why not? We can't make somebody communicate. Not everybody wants to communicate through a medium once they pass over. Some people find it very difficult to communicate. Sometimes they might have communication problems and find it difficult to work with a certain medium. Now, for an example, if a person doesn't like me while they're alive, when they pass over, they still won't like me. So coming back to communicate with me would be very, very difficult, if not impossible. And we have to work about energy is important. And also some mediums appeal greater to the spirit world than other mediums do. But I think that people who are visiting mediums have to be very choosy. And I don't know what it's like in the States, but I think it happened in the States. First of all, recording a medium, recording the messages in a private consultation can be like a volcano on the point of eruption. Because if a medium makes a prediction and that prediction doesn't come to fruition, then technically they can be sued. And it did happen in America some years ago. And this is why the law in this country in the UK has changed. Two of the archaic laws have been repealed, and they've replaced it with a consumer's law. When the consumer's law came into effect, all the clairvoyants throughout the UK presented themselves to 10 Downing Street to complain. Well, my answer to that is, if you're genuine, then there's nothing to complain about. You just do your job and that's it. So in other words, we can't demand or command the spirit. We can't call them back, and we can't do predictions about the future unless we make it clear that it's all for entertainment purposes. Also, there's a lot of medical mediums around now. Diagnosing illness in the UK, it's illegal, and I'm sure it's illegal in America too. The mediumship is, you have to be aware of certain laws and certain rules and regulations. You have to work to a moral code. Certain principles apply. So apart from being a medium and good at your job, you have to be aware of what you're doing, and you are responsible for the people who consult you for more reasons than one. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, yes. And I had a session one time. We were actually doing a table tipping, and one of the most, it was a sad thing, but it was I learned a lot from the experiences that we were doing a table tipping, myself and another medium, and we had customers there from different places, and there were two people there who were together, and at some point someone came through for one of the people sitting there. It was a young man, and we said, "There's someone here for you." And it was interesting because I could see the shadow figure at the other side of the room. He physically, I could see him there. And he was coming through the table tipping session. And the sitter said, "I don't want to hear from that person. I know who that is. I acknowledge who that is, but I don't want to talk to him." And I could literally see his shadow in the corner of the room recoil and just kind of pull back. And I just felt so much sadness in that. I could feel how sad that spirit was and how desperate that spirit needed to tell this young man whatever it was they wanted to tell him, to deliver that message. And the sitter wouldn't take it. And it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. And we tried to explain to him that you need to just let him say what he needs to say. It's not about you, it's about him. Let him say what he's got to say. And he wouldn't accept it. And it was kind of heart-wrenching. It really was. And people don't realize what goes on the other side while all of this is going on, while you're getting a message. And there's a lot of orchestration over there. It takes a lot for them to be able to come through. And people have to be open. So whether you're the medium or the sitter, you got to be open. Understand that you just have to be open to whatever that experience brings. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But also, another point that should be made, if a person has an inability to communicate with a medium, they often have to go through an intermediary. It could be your spirit guide. It could be their spirit guide. So we all know what happens when information is given to one person to pass on to another. It can often change. Now that sounds a bit of a cop-out to a skeptic, I know that, but that is what happens when a person tries to communicate, and it's quite ambiguous. It doesn't quite fit because the information is given to the intermediary, which could be the disembodied person working with the medium. So there's a lot of things to learn in mediumship. And,
absolutely. Absolutely, yes. Yes, and even in psychic readings, I always tell people, I always give a disclaimer first, and I always tell people that I'm picking up what's going on in your auric field now, at this precise moment. Influences, thought forms, things that you have put out there. I'm looking at that right now. Nothing's ever written in stone. There's a lot of variables. All you have to do is change one thought form, and you change everything in a psychic reading. So just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean it's written in stone. It's just that's what's happening with you on that energetic level at that very moment.
I think another point for developing mediums, One of the useful tools that you can use in your development is vibraturgy. Used to be called vibraturgy. It's psychometry today. So if you take an article from an anonymous person and hold it in your hands, but use both hands and as many fingers as possible in the exercise, you glean a lot of information from the energy that whether it's a ring or a watch, is giving to you. Now, vibraturgy or psychometry is quite effective in the process of development. I use it quite a lot in my workshops, and it's surprising. Some people have an aptitude for it and others don't. So it's a useful tool, I think.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Developing idioms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Psychometry is wonderful for that. And you'll either connect to it or you won't, but it's certainly good for exercises. You know?
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick little break right here. And then when we come back, we'll give our weekly advice to budding mediums.
Follow me, Kalila Smith, into the mysterious world of spirits. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, is a concise how-to manual for anyone who enjoys a good ghost hunt. Learn the history of spiritualism, learn what a ghost is and what is not, learn the truth about poltergeist. We'll also delve into the realm of spiritual beings that never were human, the world of demons, real vampires, and we'll look at some real case studies. This is a must-have for everyone interested in ghost hunting, from the novice to the expert. Completely updated in its second edition, this is one of the first guides for ghost hunting based on actual first-hand experiences. Available on Amazon.com. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, by Kalila Smith.
Hi, we're back. So let's talk a little bit about another exercise that people can do. One of the things that I learned as I was developing was working with symbols, working with different symbols, like throwing out symbols to, I had these little cards with different pictures on them, and just looking at the card and saying what it first means to me. Like if I see a picture of a rose, what does that bring up in me? And kind of working with my spiritual crew on the other side and kind of developing a language with them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? I do something very similar. Dolly puts photographs or symbols. She'll draw certain symbols and put them in different envelopes, and we'll seal them, and we'll give them to the people in the workshop, and they have to, and it's passed around. They swap over, and they have to write down what they feel is in the envelope, what symbol is in the envelope. It might be a bird, a seagull, or it could be a tree. But they often, depending on the individual, they often will glean some information which is very connected to a tree or a seagull. They might draw a boat or a water, which is in association with the seagull. That's one exercise we use. Many years ago, I was doing a show in Southport in the UK, and the first part of the show, I got nothing. I struggled. I found that it was very ambiguous, the information. Luckily, the audience were with me, and they weren't very cruel. And I thought, what the hell am I going to do? In the second part, it was completely different. It seemed to take off, because what I do something called psychic handwriting analysis. It's nothing to do with graphology. It's something completely different. And I thought, I wonder will this work? So what I was doing, I got somebody to go around the audience, selected members of the audience, to give me a random sample of handwriting, and plus their date of birth. And I found that I could glean all kinds of information from the handwriting. And while I was doing that, sometimes somebody from the spirit world would communicate with me. So I just needed a lever, a crutch, something to focus on. And this is basically what psychometry does to you. It gives you something to focus your attention on, and it often unleashes your potential, your psychic potential, as well as your mediumistic. So we often need a crutch to help us in our mediumistic skill. It's no good saying to a teacher, well, I think I'm clairvoyant, because you might not be clairvoyant only. You might have other abilities, such as clairsentience or clairaudience, or one of the other clairs. So development has to be holistic, the way I do it anyway. And I develop the whole person to see what potential they do have. Fascinating.
Yes, it is. It really is. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point to bring up. And so, well, we're getting ready to come to the closure of our show. And again, if you want to email us, if you have a question, or if you want to schedule a reading with either one of us, we both do readings via telephone. And if you're interested in that, you can drop us a line at afterlifemysteries@gmail.com. Or you can contact us directly on our Facebook pages. He's Billy Roberts, and I am Kalila Smith. And we thank you for tuning in today. You guys are wonderful. We love you. We appreciate you coming in and listening to us. And we hope you have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.